Welcome to Felony Friday, a presentation of the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here is your host, John Odermatt.
Felons, friends, and freedom lovers, welcome back to another edition of Felony Friday, a weekly show right here on the Lions of Liberty podcast. Of course, Felony Friday is the show where each and every single Friday I focus on exposing injustice in this nation's broken criminal justice system. And on this week's show, I got a very exciting, very controversial guest who's coming on to talk about a project that is going to, well, let's just say it's going to upset some of the gun grabbers on the left. And it's taking some laws that they think that they put in place to protect people. But in fact, these laws that put in place have taken away the rights of American citizens to defend our rights, to defend our life, to defend our property. And with this specific project, we have the opportunity, I should say, to push back and to reclaim some of that ground. So you don't want to miss this. Just hang on just a minute. I just want to remind you guys, if you've forgotten, that this is only one of 3 shows on the Lions of Liberty podcast feed, which you can subscribe to by going to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Podcasts, Overcast, wherever you hear your podcasts. Go there, subscribe. So you get our Monday show with Mark Claire, our longest running program, our flagship program, where Mark interviews the leaders in the Liberty movement. This past Monday, he interviewed one of the greatest leaders, one of the most knowledgeable people in the field of foreign policy that I've ever heard and met in my entire life, the incredible Scott Horton. So if you missed that, click back in your feed, check that out. Every Wednesday, we have a show hosted by Brian McWilliams. It is called Electric Liberty Land, and Brian is a very funny, very crass, very passionate lover of liberty, and he does a fantastic job with that show. It's getting great numbers, so check that out every Wednesday and every Friday. Of course, this show, Felony Friday, where I interview people who are making waves in the legal system, in the criminal justice system. I bring on, from time to time, felons to tell their story, their plight going through this broken criminal justice system. So that's the 3 shows, guys. So check them all out. And that's it. Wait, one more thing. Show notes page, because you're good for this episode. You're going to need it to check out some of the links to help out, hopefully. You can find the show notes page at lionsofliberty.com/FF161. All right, let's get rolling into today's show. My guest today is Austin Jones from Atlas Arms. Atlas Arms is a 501c3, which has the goal of bringing armor-piercing bullets to the masses. Austin is the chief engineer, and he heads up the project. He is also the co-founder of 2020 Armor, and Austin has previous experience in the startup enterprise, application, experimental technology, and soft-body armor. In addition to that, he's done design work on the micrometeoroid shielding for soft-bodied spacecraft. So I'm sure he's a very, very intelligent guy, and has contributed to in-depth knowledge of the principles and technologies employed in textile-based ballistic protection. Austin, welcome to Felony Friday.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show. And, the reason that I'm having you on is to talk about the Atlas Arms project. I'm looking forward to spending time talking about that. But before we go down that road, before we go down that path, I know that you're a liberty lover, a libertarian. If you could just give my audience a little bit of a background on, what lit that spark? What really drew you towards the ideas of liberty?
Well, I think I have somewhat of a, common path that I followed. Mm-hmm. I guess you could say that when I was young, I was kind of conservative. And then midway through high school, I started realizing that I was not all about kind of the neoconservative ideas that were going around the Republican Party at the time, that I guess my politics lied elsewhere. And I very much bought into kind of the whole, the great mythology of the American Revolution and I still do. I saw, great. My heroes are Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and those. So that's kind of what it was. I think at the end of high school, you could have wrapped my entire politics up into a "Don't Tread on Me" flag. One of those, right? And then as I went through college, I really thought about it a lot, and I have some friends that are really big into philosophy that I owe to kind of help me refine my ideals. I tried to, really think about in black and white terms what the principles are that I believe in, and I tried to stay coherent to those. So pretty soon, by the time I graduated university, I guess it was 4 years ago, I realized that I have two principles. That is that individualism. So individuals are the fundamental units of humanity and the only moral and ethical actors. And second, that utility is absolutely irrelevant to morality. And so I think that everything I believe in, all of my belief in liberty and non-aggression, market economics, just kind of, falls in place with coherency to those two ideals.
Yeah, and I think as libertarians, we can sometimes get into trouble when arguing using a utilitarian argument because it's not foolproof. It doesn't mean that it's arguing from that perspective, saying it's the best case all the time might not be true. But when you talk about the ideas of liberty from an individual perspective, it's always true that you shouldn't harm someone if they're not harming you. You shouldn't use coercion to further your ideas. So I'm definitely on board with that.
I should say, I find that there's this nice piece of serendipity that in fact it just so happens the utility often does go along with the morality, but of course I think that it's established that way, not the other way around, because you will end up at some circumstances. Like, for instance, I do think that it is very useful to have a wall along the U.S.-Mexico line, but I also think it's immoral. So, you can't use the utility to get to the morality.
True. All right. Well, we could talk about this for probably the whole show, but that's not why everyone's listening. That's not why everyone's here. So, yeah, we want to talk about Atlas Arms, this really unique project. I spent the past 2 days looking into it, reading about it, watching the video you have there on the website. So before we dive into the specifics, can you just give people an overview on really the genesis of this idea? Where did it come from, and who else is behind it with you?
Sure. Okay. So for me, this kind of starts, there are kind of two lead-ins to it. My personal lead-in, which is that for a long time, I was thinking along the lines of, well, I've always been kind of a gun guy, and I have my libertarian streak that's quite radical, and I'm an engineer. So I was thinking about projects that could use technology to undermine firearms regulations. The first idea I had was to make a homemade gunpowder factory, because gunpowder is extremely difficult to produce and is like the easiest handle that I think regulators have on the fundamental technology of firearms. That doesn't work out. You get to a point where foreseeably it does in fact become as dangerous as you might think it is. So that didn't happen. Yeah. But I did have some other like really radical concepts that I'm very excited to work on in the coming several years. It got to a point where I found a lot of friends. I found Mike Crumling, who helps on the project now. I found John, who's an engineer at Defense Distributed. And they're really excited about this stuff, and I am too. But I knew I would need a simpler project to start with. And this is by no means simple, but that's where I came to here. So I was thinking, what firearms regulations can we just obsolete with technology? Make it such that what the regulations are locking down doesn't even matter anymore. And so that's how I came to this. Now, the other path is the legal. So in 1985, Ronald Reagan was president. You know, that pro-gun conservative. And what did we get out of it? But, a fistful of firearms regulations, including the machine gun ban, and also this ban on armor-piercing ammunition. A few years earlier, NBC had a primetime special where they talked about, cop killer bullets, how, police wear body armor, and these armor-piercing ammunitions that are on store shelves endanger police because they're capable of breaching their armor. Now, the fact of the matter is, to this day, not a single police officer in the United States has been killed with armor-piercing ammunition.
Really? Wow.
So it's entirely, well, you know how it is. I mean, it's just the kind of the sensationalism.
That's the same thing around assault weapons, these weapons of war on the street. Same idea.
Yes, exactly. But the law in 1985, it banned the manufacture and the import of armor-piercing ammunition, but not the sale or the possession. Mm-hmm. And it defines as armor-piercing ammunition a projectile that falls under one of two criteria. The first is composition. So it can't. So armor-piercing ammunition is a projectile or projectile core composed of steel, iron, depleted uranium, tungsten, beryllium, copper, brass, or bronze. The other thing is that even if it doesn't have any of that in it, it can't be a fully jacketed projectile, or it is a fully jacketed projectile whose jacket weighs more than 25% of its total mass.
So, I think I know the answer, but what was the reasoning behind these specific limits here? Was the only armor-piercing bullets at the time composed of these elements, or?
Right. Well, so obviously you can't say anything that's able to pierce armor because you're just opening the door. I mean, that's banning essentially all guns, right? I mean, like rifles can penetrate, pistol armor. And it just, it doesn't work well like that. So, and then you also can't say, well, anything intended to, because intent, I mean, that's a not very easy term to define, and you can get that flipped over. So they really had to look at kind of the features of the ammunition of the day that was intended to penetrate armor. And so there's a brand called KTW that was made of it was just like solid brass bullets. And then of course what the military uses on a large scale, it's depleted uranium. And then for small arms, of course, they use mostly lead and copper jacketed ammunition that has like a steel or tungsten core. So I think that they were really just trying to put it through a features test. It's like, what is an assault weapon? Well, you start with what you think of as an assault weapon, and then you say, oh, well, the features on it are this, that, and that. And I think that's what they did here. They just said, what is armor piercing? And then they identified the features that armor piercing ammunition has.
So what's your plan with this project to overcome those limitations?
Well, I think the most important intuition for libertarians to realize is that legislative law and the state in general in its mode of control is wholly reactive. They can only try to manage what already exists. And even of that, we know, like, we're always laughing at their ridiculous understanding of gun technology. So they can barely understand what was. And now we've had 33 years since this ban. There are new materials. There's like millions of materials on Earth. There's many more ways to make a bullet penetrate armor than what they were using in 1985.
Right.
So that's what really the crux of my project. I'm using materials that were they're still uncommon, but they were very rare and expensive then, and they're not now. Using a different, I don't know, you could say construction. It's a new way, it's a new physicality, a fundamentally new bullet design. And then also
a new design that's never been used before? Is it?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
there are things like it that have been made, and you could say that it's kind of like this crossed with that, but nothing like this. It's a whole new way of manufacturing. So but between the two, new materials and this new geometry, I will go out on a limb and say that these projectiles will work much better even to penetrate armor than the armor-piercing ammunition from 1985.
What makes you think that's the case?
Well, first of all, I know what I'm talking about because I know body armor, as we talked about earlier. But then also there's lots of research. I do have prototypes, and I'm looking at testing them in the coming months. I'm really working hard with some gunsmiths to get a test platform. But I've done a lot of research on military arms from around the world, stuff made by the U.S. military, and some ammunition made in Russia, some that's made in the Czech Republic, and none of it is like what I'm doing, but just kind of the aspects of what they're doing, of what they have done, that put together in my I guess professional judgment. It is much more than enough to convince me that this is going to be far better than anything the public has ever seen.
That's exciting. So you're starting out with the 9mm, right? That'll be your first attempt, your first release.
Right.
What's the reason for that?
So 9mm is first and foremost the most popular cartridge in the United States. I don't think that I think the most popular model of pistol in the world in the United States is the 1911, but that shoots, 45 auto, which is, I hate to say it for the fanboys out there, but it's a fat, slow sucker, and it's not good for penetrating armor. But 9mm is very, very common. More 9mm bought than even 45 auto, and it's pretty light and fast, and that helps. A lot of armor penetration comes down to making it really fast. You want speed and not so much the mass of the bullet. So that's one thing, and to me though that's huge. Like that it is everywhere. That it's so ubiquitous. If we can do this in 9mm, we could of course do it with even more powerful cartridges like 10mm or 40 Smith & Wesson.
Right.
But if it's 9, then that's it. I mean, pistol armor becomes obsolete at that point. Right now, the 5.7 pistol can penetrate soft body armor, but nobody has that. It's a very expensive gun to buy. The ammunition is expensive. Nobody has it. It's a very niche kind of thing. So it doesn't really, it doesn't matter. So, 9mm, if you do it in 9mm, then it is done, and it really matters to the public.
So have you received any pushback either from just individuals, maybe people on the left, progressives, who are like, who is this guy? He's going to kill everybody, or from the government? Have you had any pushback from that direction?
This is like an interesting case study because, of course, there's like the typical anti-gun crowd that's, championed by Pelosi and Feinstein and Schumer. And the Huffington Post put out a piece on what I'm doing. I guess it was last week.
It's probably right before they all got laid off. Must have been. There were some big layoffs at the Huffington Post.
Oh yeah, I didn't even know. I didn't even know.
Yeah.
But so they put out something, and I saw a lot of leftists crying about it on Twitter. But I think largely they don't even know what to think about it, because especially again the left and the progressivists, again, it's just a reactionary machine. They know that gun control means this. Like whatever we're arguing about right now, that's what they think about. So for them, it's like armor-piercing ammunition has been settled for 33 years. This isn't part of the current debate. So I think that they don't even know what to think about it yet, especially because of, again, the implied anti-police nature of it. Right now, of course, the radical left, if we can use Antifa as an example, is very much opposed to to police, at least in word and theory. So yeah, I don't think that they really have a position on it yet. On the other hand, where I'm really seeing the screech back is the conservatives. And in fact, as I expected, conservatives are really divided on the issue. Some of them are very happy to, win back some of our gun rights. But the other half, of course, worships police. And, it's the thin blue line kind of stuff. They believe that police are they're great heroes, defenders of justice and all. So, of course, they still can't escape the little fence that they were put in with the arm, cop killer verbiage. And so I've had a lot of them screeching about it and saying that, oh, this is terrible, immoral. Why would you do this? So yeah, that's the way the lines are drawn.
Yeah, basically the expected response, I guess. Of course, you're going to get pushback. Yeah, I think it's really unique the way that you've talked about rolling this out. I mean, you're not going to, at least I think you said, you're not going to produce it yourself. You don't want a monopoly on the production of this ammunition. So what is that plan to roll it out? What's your strategy going to be, and how far away are we from that happening?
Well, the first thing I need is, if I can plug it right here, the first thing I need is funding. So all you listeners,
go for it.
Please, help me out, help complete the project. We have a crowdfunding page hosted on gundynamics.com. You can also go to our website, atlasarms.org, and you hit the donate button. You'll find a link to the page there. You can also donate Bitcoin, of course. But yeah, so we need to raise money for this to happen. Like I mentioned, we need to buy testing equipment first and foremost. And the equipment we need is it's not many people need it, and the ones who do usually have got government money behind them, so they've got an infinite supply of other people's money. And I'm looking at $10,000. Now, this equipment really, if it was the free market, it would cost maybe $2,000. Mm-hmm. But we're looking at $10,000, and so we need to raise that. I'm looking at ways to get around that and to demonstrate that we can penetrate armor without having this equipment. But that's really first. Once we have the equipment, I will work with the machine shop that makes my prototypes to dial in the design based on the empirical evidence that we're seeing in testing. And once I have good loading data for it and I know how to manufacture it very well, I will write code for the Ghost Gunner for this, so that anybody with a Ghost Gunner can buy or make for themselves the jigs to do it, and they can make this stuff at home. And then I will have our machine shop make a first production run, and we'll get a batch out on shelves. So all of that will happen once I put it out on shelves. That first production run, then I will publish the manufacturing specs, what you need to make the projectile, and then the loading data. So what you need to actually load the projectile into a completed cartridge. And that's it. That's the end. From there, we move on to other calibers and the other projects. That's all there is to it. So
what's the full funding that you need to execute all of this? I don't know if you said that.
I'm looking for $30,000 for the development. Now, of that, immediately $10,000 I need for the equipment, but we also need a lot of funding to pay my lawyers. And that's not just to protect me, but that's to make sure that the ATF recognizes it as the legal ammunition that it is. So other people can make this without having to worry about the ATF coming to their house, raiding their home, and dragging them away to prison. And that's quite expensive. Firearms lawyers like that are not common. And all of them live in Washington, D.C., which of course means that they get paid even more. So we need a lot of funding for that. And then, of course, we need prototyping and testing materials like like ballistics gel and clay, and of course the body armor itself, because we have to go through a lot of it, and we want to show that we can penetrate not only the cheap stuff, but even the high dollar expensive stuff.
Absolutely.
So
that's what the cops are going to have. And not that you want to shoot cops, but if they're shooting at you, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I should
slippery slope to walk down, but
I should unleash my typical disclaimer. I mean, I do believe in non-aggression. I don't believe in going around and shooting cops, but so that's not why I started this project. I started this project to give liberty back to the people, but it is a good second objective of the project to point out that you can either have police privilege or you can have firearms rights, but you can't have both.
Yeah, I think I love this project, and one of the reasons I love it so much is because, well, like you were saying before, when you're talking to someone on the left, you're talking to a gun control person, they think this is settled. They think, okay, we won this. Let's move to the next one. Let's move to take away more of these guns and take more of these guns from law-abiding citizens. Yeah. When you go back and say, nope, actually, that's not settled, and we're taking that right back, they're on their heels. They're defensive, and it opens up everything. It makes us more secure in our liberties, at least for a period of time. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I appreciate those words. Thank you. That's how I'm trying to make the project. Mm-hmm. I would like to point out also that a lot of the design work that I put into this is making it specifically easier to manufacture than traditional AP ammo, which means that if you want to take the risk, even after they make this new, if and when they make this new stuff illegal as well, you can still make it just as easily as you can make anything else with your ghost gunner. Even easier, in fact, because you don't have to buy a pre-made like 80%. You just buy stock off of like McMaster Car or somewhere. So this will still be easy for people to make. And even if the words on paper say you can't do it, I'm making sure that you still can.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, that's, I mean, I know that when you start talking about the ghost gunner, I'm drawing a blank on his name, Cody Wilson, who has gotten in some trouble lately, totally unrelated to that. Mm-hmm. But, I think his approach was the same. And when he was doing his media tour after winning his fight, really, I know there was pushback and he was getting sued by states, which I'm sure is still happening. But he was putting the gun grabbers back on their heels. And it's nice to see. It's nice to see that we're doing that from the approach of gun rights. I think as libertarians, we need to start finding ways to do that in other aspects of life, it's not easy to do, but it's a good template for success, I think, that we've seen from yourself and from Cody.
Yeah, I think so. I think the best way to fight the state is just, make the world that it's trying to control gone. Just mm-hmm. replace it with a new, more advanced world that it doesn't understand.
Exactly. So let me give you another minute here to plug everything again and let everyone know how they can help and how they can support this.
Yeah. Okay. You can go to our website to find out more. That's the place I shove everybody. It's a good hub, atlasarms.org, not .com, but .org. We are a 501c3, so it's atlasarms.org. From there, you can get to our crowdfunding site, which is hosted on gundynamics.com. I like to plug them a little bit too, because we have sort of a partnership going. Gun Dynamics is a crowdfunding site that's specifically made for firearms projects. And they have some other stuff on there that you should check out. Nothing quite as like explosive as this, but it's good because they're helping people that have been deplatformed from Kickstarter and Indiegogo. And then I guess that's about it. If you go to gundynamics.com, you can find our campaign there, or you can link to it from atlasarms.org.
All right, Austin. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode with Austin Jones. As you could tell, very knowledgeable, very smart guy, just incredible work that he's doing with Atlas Arms. I 100% fully support this. Encourage you guys to go to the website, atlasarms.org. Get involved if you can. Donate a little money. This is a very worthwhile effort, in my opinion, and I'm very, very excited to be a small part of it, being able to interview Austin today to give him a platform, because that's what the show's all about, giving a platform to people who are making changes, changing the systems, changing the laws, working for liberty in any way possible. So definitely check that out. And I don't have much to say today. I'm just going to remind you, we love all of you who listen out there. Please, if you haven't subscribed to the Lions of Liberty podcast, please consider doing that. Our patrons, the people who have loyally supported us for so long, who make it possible for us to do this show and not burn our own money and go in debt and kill ourselves over it. Able to support us. We don't make any money on this show, but at least we don't lose money, which is nice and keeps us going. That's why we've been able to do this many shows. So thank you all, from the bottom of our heart. And if you want to join in and help us out too and help this show to grow, then you can do that by going to patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. That's it. I want to thank you all for listening. This is John Odermatt signing off. Always remember to keep your head up and the fires of liberty burning.